The late afternoon sun cast a tired golden light across the quiet town of Ridgeview, where the streets were empty, and the sound of rustling leaves filled the air. A little girl in a red hoodie clutched a worn-out teddy bear as tears streaked down her dirt-smudged cheeks. She stood in front of a small white house, trembling. Her world had just been shaken. A neighbor's shouting had turned into violence, and before anyone could help, her grandmother had been struck to the ground. The old woman's frail body lay on the porch, her hand over her shoulder, pain visible in every wrinkle of her face. The little girl's sobs broke the silence of the street as she cried, "He hit my grandma. If you believe in kindness, in standing up for what's right, and in giving people second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your small support helps stories like this one reach more hearts around the world." The story of that day began just a few hours earlier when everything seemed ordinary. The little girl, Emily, was spending the afternoon at her grandma's house. A modest white home with faded blue shutters and a creaky porch swing that always groaned when it moved. Her grandmother, known around the neighborhood as Miss June, was a kind soul. She baked cookies for the kids next door, fed stray cats, and never failed to greet anyone who passed her gate. For Emily, her grandma's house was her favorite place. It smelled of cinnamon, lavender, and safety. But safety has a way of disappearing in an instant. Across the street lived a man named Carl, someone everyone avoided. He was loud, short-tempered, and always had too much to drink. That afternoon, when his anger boiled over something trivial, a dog barking, a trash can tipped over, he stormed across the street, shouting insults that echoed through the air. Miss June, always the peacemaker, stepped off her porch and tried to calm him down. But in his rage, Carl did something no one expected. He shoved her hard. She stumbled backward, her shoulder striking the edge of the porch before she fell. Emily screamed. The teddy bear slipped from her arms as she ran to her grandmother, who winced in pain but tried to smile to calm her granddaughter. "It's okay, baby," she whispered weakly, but Emily knew it wasn't. She knew something terrible had just happened, and that the world for a moment had stopped being kind. A neighbor called the police, but in towns like Ridgeview, things moved slow. Carl went back to his house like nothing had happened. Emily sat by her grandma, holding her hand, shaking. The tears wouldn't stop. She felt powerless, until a sound cut through the distance. The low, deep rumble of motorcycles. It started as one engine, then another, and then a dozen more. The sound grew louder, closer, heavier, like thunder rolling down the street. Miss June opened her eyes weakly and said, "It's okay, sweetheart, those are just the boys." Emily looked up, confused, until she saw them. A group of bikers, their black leather vests gleaming in the sunlight, patches reading Angels of Mercy stitched across their backs. They were her grandma's old friends, men who used to ride with her. Late husband, a war veteran who had once been their club leader. The bikes rolled in and stopped in a line outside the house. The engines fell silent, replaced by the heavy sound of boots hitting the pavement. The leader, a tall man with tattoos winding down his arms and a beard that made him look older than he probably was, walked toward Emily. He crouched down to her level. His eyes softened as he saw the teddy bear clutched tightly in her hands and the tears running down her cheeks. "What happened, sweetheart?" he asked gently. Emily looked up, trembling, and whispered, "He hit my grandma. That was all it took." The leader stood up slowly, turned his head toward the house across the street, and said nothing. But his silence carried the weight of thunder. Behind him, the bikers exchanged looks, the kind of looks that meant business. Without another word, they walked across the street, their heavy boots thudding in unison. Carl peeked through his blinds, and his smug expression faltered when he saw them. He stepped outside, trying to sound tough, but his voice shook. The leader didn't raise his hand or shout. Instead, he stood there, quiet and still, letting the silence crush Carl's arrogance. "You laid a hand on her," the leader said finally, his voice deep and calm. "On Miss June, the woman who once patched up half of us when we got hurt. The woman who made us food when we had nowhere else to go. You hurt our family." Carl muttered something about it being an accident, but the men didn't care for excuses. The leader took a step closer until Carl had to look up to meet his eyes. "You're going to fix this," he said. "You're going to apologize, and you're going to take responsibility for what you did. Because around here, we take care of our own." The rest of the bikers didn't say a word. They just stood there, silent, unyielding, until Carl, trembling, nodded and mumbled an apology. But it wasn't enough. The leader made him walk across the street, right to Miss June's porch. Emily watched from behind her grandmother's chair as the man who hurt her knelt and stammered out an apology. Miss June, kind even in pain, forgave him. She said softly, Anger makes fools of us all, just don't let it happen again. The leader placed a hand on Carl's shoulder and said, "She's better than you deserve. Now get out of here." Carl didn't argue. He went back inside, shutting the door quickly. The tension broke, replaced by something quieter, the kind of peace that follows a storm. But the story didn't end there. The bikers stayed. They helped Miss June inside, cleaned up the porch, and one of them rode to town to bring a doctor. Emily sat beside her grandma the whole time, her small hand never letting go. The leader, whose name was Mason, sat on the steps outside, staring at the horizon as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Later, when Emily came out holding 2 cups of lemonade, one for him and one for her, Mason smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, taking the cup. "You were very brave today." Emily looked up at him. "You made him stop," she said softly. "You made him say sorry?" Mason shook his head. "No, kiddo. You did that. You told the truth. You stood up for someone you love. That's what makes the world right again. Not fists or fear, but heart." Emily didn't understand it all, but she smiled. The tears had dried, and for the first time that day, she felt safe again. That night, as the bikers prepared to leave, Mason walked up to Miss June's door one last time. "You rest easy now," he said. "We'll keep an eye on things for a while." Miss June smiled, her eyes moist. "Still watching over me after all these years," she said softly. He chuckled. "You patched us up too many times to forget, ma'am. Your family." As the engines roared back to life and the line of bikes disappeared into the distance, Emily stood on the porch, her teddy bear tucked under one arm, waving until the taillights vanished. The house fell quiet again, but it was a peaceful quiet. The kind that comes after knowing you're protected. Days passed, and Carl never caused trouble again. Word spread through the neighborhood about what had happened. Some people called the bikers troublemakers, others called them heroes. But those who knew Miss June understood. They were neither. They were protectors, bound by loyalty, love, and a code that didn't need laws to define it. Weeks later, on a cool autumn evening, Mason returned alone. He brought a small box. Inside it was a leather vest, child-sized, with a tiny patch sewn on the back. Little angel. He knelt before Emily again and handed it to her. "Your grandpa started this club," he said. "He always believed in helping those who can't help themselves. One day, you'll grow up, and maybe you'll forget faces and names, but don't forget what happened today. Don't forget what standing up for someone feels like." Emily nodded, clutching the vest. "I won't." As Mason rode away, the rumble of his bike faded into the distance, leaving behind the faint scent of fuel and freedom. Emily looked down at the vest and smiled. For her, it wasn't just a piece of leather. It was a promise. Years later, people in Ridgeview would still tell the story about the day a little girl cried for her grandma, and a group of bikers answered the call. Some said it was about revenge. Others said it was justice. But those who really understood knew it was about something simpler: love, loyalty, and the courage to stand up when it matters most. Because sometimes heroes don't wear badges or capes. Sometimes they wear leather and carry scars, riding through small towns where kindness still has a home. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness and courage still exist in the world, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading stories that restore faith in humanity. And before you go, tell us in the comments, would you stand up for someone who couldn't defend themselves?